Something. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I've also been joined, most of you have heard me talk ad nauseum about RPA, but today I thought we'd switch it up a little bit, and we're going to talk about the brains, that these machines begin to form as they start emerging and getting smarter and doing more and processing more in the organizations. Because I've got some great examples, and as they mentioned in the beginning, make sure you answer your questions as they pop up. That will happen throughout the course of the presentation. So I thought it'd be fun or interesting, maybe I'm wrong, to kind of lay out the history of digital transformation in finance. And it's funny, going all the way back, paper ledgers and, an abacus. I didn't put an abacus on here, right? But you could go way back, right, to basic arithmetic, machines getting smarter, with the beginning of mechanical adding machines. And then the introduction of computer technology, that becoming something that was not as, as uncommon, for a back office to begin to have, the advent of the software that you CFOs love, the baby steps of Excel, that we know and love today, and then interacting with machines and software. That was sort of the inception of how that came to be. Now, I've mentioned that, I always talk to you guys about robots, right? I'm always talking about how robots can help augment our workforce, the existing workforce that you guys have. And by doing that, by kind of adding that technology, the trend has been in the direction of more technology, more efficiencies, right? And then really the burden falls on the CFO to begin to understand what technologies make sense, right? When is it overkill and when is it not? Well, we're always trying to find better data, right? At the end of the day, we can call it what you want, but we apply these things so that we get better data so that we can make better decisions about our organization. And the advent of AI and very practical ways of using it is something that I think you guys can all benefit from. And if anything that you get out of today, maybe it'll spark a question and a way that you can interact with somebody in your organization to get a little bit more clarity about how you can help them drive value for your business unit. So this, illustration here is meant to sort of tell a story. So if you follow the train of thought from the left side of the screen to the right, we have finance and IT. It's always coming together to make things happen, or sometimes coming together to pick at each other for maybe not seeing eye to eye always, right? So it's not always, the approach hasn't always been traditionally the same, but they always have to come together to align on the objectives for an organization, right? Mentioning again the RPA portion, right, which stands for robotic process automation. It's essentially a software that acts and can perform keystrokes, clicks, and I'm happy to share more information about that technology. But really what we're talking about today is sort of that next level. So as the robot begins to perform tasks, begins to help accountants, begins to help in different business units, entering data, perhaps, even processing extensive use cases that Steve will get into later in the presentation, the machines have gotten smarter by them repeating the patterns over and over again and having large data sets, right? But large volume of data sets. The machines essentially get smarter, and that's where you get that term machine learning, right? It's truly that the machine is getting smarter, getting more proficient with your data and the way that your business runs. There's many applications of AI. Today, we're going to focus on three very basic applications that I think you can relate to and that you've probably had business stakeholders ask you to collaborate on. And I think they're going to really kind of give us some good information. All right. So when we were asking you guys kind of what to think through, and this is something that's very true, is, there's always lofty conversations about some of these emerging technologies, and some of them are hype, right? Or maybe over, exaggerated on the application or use. But guess what? AI is actually becoming and emerging to be more of a reality, in a lot of organizations. And what's really cool about what's happening with the advent of this being applicable to mid-market organizations and even startups is that organizations are getting smarter before they even take action. Steve's going to get into some of the places where you can apply it. But really what I wanted to press upon, you guys that had reached out and sort of gave me feedback is, we hear about AI a lot, but really is it useful? I mean, is that real? Is that really something that we can have in our organization? And the answer is yes. So don't take it from me, take it from the analysts. And I know that this is a source that, especially in this community, we tend to rely on. And this comes from a number of different articles about hyperautomation. But I wanted to draw your attention to the third one. 50% of enterprises will have devised artificial intelligence. Right? I mean, that's a big number, and it's definitely up as well. So as we start thinking about the fact that our competition, right, your competition, other organizations are applying this and getting smarter and training their robots, not just their people, but their robots are getting smarter. It's important to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, right? And you don't want to be left behind in a competitive situation if it's not necessary. All right, and we can feel free to launch another polling question here too. I think that's a great place to do it. This too, what I wanted to do while the polling question's in the middle of the second one is you guys also talked about who it is that we should ask, right? Who to ask. And, to me, I always suggest going to the expert directly. I am notorious for going to a subject matter expert that understands something. Steve is often one of those calls, to explain something so that I understand the context of it, and then I can take it to the next level. As finance leaders, your role has evolved, right? It's not only that you are bookkeeping and looking to historical data of what's happened in the past. It's not just reporting on historical. You're being asked to be predictive and prescriptive about what's happening in the future of your organization. So it's really important to kind of see where it is that technology can be applied to what you guys do. And then who's who. So when we talk about all of these different places, applying these different technologies, who actually does that function? Does that sit in IT? Is it a new role? Is it a subcategory? And, the illustration earlier showed this concept of a center of excellence with hyperautomation. And more, there's kind of this emerging role. The degrees are actually changing that the kids are getting these days, to have sort of a biz side, right? Where it's not only a business degree, but it's also adding that IT component to their education. And more finance professionals are getting smarter there too. So as these hyperautomation COEs are developed, they're largely comprised of finance professionals, former audits, who kind of had that subject matter expertise and an interest in, automation as well. So more and more you're seeing kind of that dual role. So definitely find out if you have a COE. If there's robots in your organization as a finance leader, you definitely should know that. And then with the application of AI, and Steve will get into this more, there's other roles that have emerged as part of this as well. And where to learn, you can always ask vendors. The CFO Leadership Council does a great job of giving you guys the best of partners that I know answer questions. I respect all of the sponsors of the CFO Leadership Council, truly know their stuff, and they always have, some of those answers. The other thing is I always recommend going to Gartner, check out the data set of what the analysts do. That's always a great place to get started in learnings. But without further ado, it's better to go straight to the source. So I'm pleased to introduce our CEO. He is the co-founder and co-CEO of WonderBotz, Steve Laval. And Steve is not only completely decorated in the education space, but he has seen every single aspect through his career of digital transformation, from every different angle, and has advised leaders, like you for a long time. So I'm really excited to hear his presentation, and his application of AI and some of the tools that we as, a hyperautomation firm have adopted along the way to drive better business values for our clients. That's all we're trying to do at the end of the day. And this is just one more, arrow, so to speak, in our quiver. So without further ado, Steve, I'll turn it over to you. And I'm gonna go off camera for a couple, but if you need me, I'm right here. Okay.
Excellent. Thanks, Paula. Good afternoon, everyone. Paula, can you the next page, please? Okay, so firstly, I would start off with, I did not get my Uber Eats card, Paula. So just
right off the bat.
Right off the bat, marked down for that. But generally, though, excellent presentation. Thanks for the intro here. So so Paula, it's my pleasure to be here with all of you today, and I'm happy to share a lot of the knowledge that I picked up and that WonderBotz has picked up over the years. And of course, we'll have time for questions at the end. And I will say, however, that we're going to have a business discussion today. Now, if any of you are secretly AI decision scientists, on the call and plan to ask us hard questions. I did bring a ringer onto the call in case that happens, and I would reach out to him for that. But for the most part, we're going to be having a business discussion, in particular around how these technologies have matured and how people are starting to use them. So I thought, Paula said hyper reality. We've been talking about AI, forever. For a while, for 10, 20 years at this point. There's movies about it, all these promises that are being set in expectation. But it's only recently, in our opinion, that it's been something that we can operationalize in business and actually get the value on. Now, AI requires that it be integrated with other technologies in order to really capture a lot of that value. But we're not going to talk about a lot of that today. I'm going to talk more about the models, and I will talk about some of the other technologies, but I wasn't planning on going into it. So if you look at this chart here, so let's just kind of get grounded on what we're talking about here. So AI is an expansion of a lot of other. It's a continuation of a lot of other techniques and forms of math. So it's all based on a lot of advanced math, which is the gray on the bottom there. But beyond that, now let's talk about machine learning and AI, and they're often used in the same breath. So machine learning happens when the machine actually gets smarter on the answer by observing how other people have answered the question. So essentially, we say it gets smarter with experience. So that if I get a request from Paula that she's thirsty, and then I hand her a bottle of Coke, and she says no, and then I hand her a bottle of orange juice, and she says no, and then I hand her a bottle of water, and then she says yes. Okay, so now the machine is kind of learning. It's like, all right, when Paula is thirsty, let's start with the water, because that might be the thing that is the quickest answer to the question, and machine learning is integrated in a lot of different models and a lot of different technologies. So but just for this discussion, it's about how the machines get smarter in coming up with the correct answer. Now AI, which includes machine learning, is a bigger notion. And that's really where the computer is able to, we say, mimic human behavior. So what does that really mean, mimicking human behavior? It's like, so if and mind you, we're still talking about decisioning here, right? So it's really mimicking human choices. Given a set of data that you might be presented with, it's going to come up with an answer. For that data. Now you say, okay, well, those of you who are familiar, well, isn't that really just a rules engine? But imagine you had a rules engine where you had, tens of thousands of rules that were being applied, because the AI model can consume all of the data, all of the context, all of the details, historical patterns, and using this advanced math, it comes up with a perspective that says this is the right answer. Now, from there, the machine learning kicks in the event that it's not the right answer. But when we're talking about AI, we're talking about a machine code that's going to come up with an answer that's similar to how a human would come up with the answer if they had access to the same information. Now, and a lot of times, by the way, where you're looking at decisioning, where you've got to consider a lot of factors, people just can't consume all that data in your head. And that's where we talk about judgment, we talk about expertise. But here now we can actually use these models to come up with these answers. So I'll give you, a couple examples. Like if you, a very famous example from Watson, we always use Watson from IBM, if you're familiar with that. That was able to consume lots of symptoms and lots of treatment plans and come up with a therapy recommendation for patients who were ill. So a more common example, I don't know if there are any insurers on the call here, but when you buy an insurance policy, you get underwritten for risk. So that's where the underwriter evaluates, if I buy life insurance, how much should the company charge me for that? So they would look at a whole lot of factors to come up with that answer. So that's really kind of when we're talking about from an AI perspective. Now, the other side of this is you'll often hear the conversation of a model come in, because unlike a human where we can jump from thing to thing very quickly, AI is encapsulating the concept of a model, and these models are, do specific things, and you can have a variety of models. Like you could have a model that understands the sentiment of this discussion. Is Steve happy? Is he sad? Could understand, read handwriting, which is often hard to do. So when we talk about AI, we practice it in the context of a model, and the models are built on an AI platform, and then those AI platforms often have a machine learning component to them. So let's move on, Paula. So just for our discussion here, I don't know if anyone else uses this construct, but I find it very helpful. There's a concept of what I call strategic AI and operational AI. So think about strategic AI, and the real deciding factor for me is how quickly do we need the answer. So strategic AI might be like I'm going to set out and gather from the website all of my competitor information. I'm going to consume contracts. I'm going to look at feedback from my customers, my competitor customers, and I'm going to come up with some kind of a perspective on my competitive strengths and weaknesses. So that's an example of what I say strategic, in that when it comes in, it's not doing something, but it's informing us as leaders for a decision that we want to make. Okay, so that's sort of a grand one. A more mundane example might be if we're comparing two similar but different legal contracts. So I'm not talking about Microsoft Word compare document, but if I have a contract from one service provider, and a contract from another service provider, I might want to compare them to say, what are the differences in terms to help me, again, make a decision for what I want to do. All right. Now, so that's the characteristic in my mind of strategic, is that it happens, but it's more infrequent. Okay. Now, when we get to operational, here now, it's like, okay, so this is going to be integrated into a real-time or near real-time process. So in this case, this AI model is going to be connected into a process flow, and it's going to be integrated into that process flow, and the outcomes of that model will directly impact how that particular process performs. And that could be, for example, we all have chat, we all go online and we see the little chat robot in the bottom of a lot of websites that says, hey, you want to talk. For the most part, those are chatbots, and those are robots. Those are AI enabled applications that are trying to understand what you're asking. And then they're either going to point you to pages on the website, or they're going to try to answer your direct questions. Or if you say, I guess if you were to type in, I want to buy, it might, take you directly to a salesperson, But the point of the natural language is that or any of us as a user, we don't have to know enter code 123-2. It's like, hey, I want to know more about this. You kind of were speaking in a natural language. And then the robot, I keep saying robots, but the model would interpret the request for that and then put it into a structured format that then can be either feed a rules engine or other types of information. So again, this strategic operational is important. We'll come back to it a couple of times, but just wanted you to understand that. Okay, let's hit the next one. All right, so I know these are mostly CFOs here, so you're going to want to know. I was gonna say, like, I should have probably put this in the other order: is how much is it going to cost first, and then what are the benefits of it? Because I know when I talk to most of our CFO clients are like, okay, what is this going to cost me? But let's think about the AI ROI model. And there are lots of ways to do this. This is sort of a concept of an NPV model here. The benefits can take the shape in many forms, and the benefits themselves may depend upon if it's this kind of strategic or operational model, right? Because if it's a strategic model building this kind of benchmarking, or I was just looking at a use case where the model could build a confidential information memorandum from an M&A perspective. Okay, so these are things that are going to result in better decisions. So you'd have to think, well, would I assign a revenue number to the better decision? Would I assign a revenue number or a value number to reliability, you certainly could apply a number to time savings and something like that. Because if the alternative is I got to go have a lot of people who are going to build that for me. But so the benefits themselves will depend a lot on, operationally speak, from the kind of model and what you value and what's important to your organization. And you'll ultimately score kind of the qualitative and the quantitative side. But on the cost side here, so whether that's plus benefits minus the cost of setup, minus the cost of operating the robot, operating the models. So from a setup cost, there are a few things that you need to think about in your models. But one is, should I build my model or should I rent my model? Those are probably like the first biggest question to have. And for a lot of mundane tasks, like if I mentioned sentiment analysis, so that's where the model would evaluate whether we're happy or sad. Those are available. You can get them on Google, you can get them on Microsoft Store, and you just feed it the information, and it comes back with a score that you can then interpret that, right? So if you were to say to me, "Oh, I want to build my own sentiment model," I'd say, "Why would you build your own sentiment model when there are many of them that can be acquired?" Now, if you told me that I have this very secret process within my company that I wouldn't want to have anyone else to have access to, and it's proprietary, and the insights from it are proprietary, and they're integral to our competitive differentiation and value prop. I'm like, okay, well, that kind of makes sense, right? So then you'd say, all right, so that might make sense for something that you want to go build. But keep in mind that when you rent, you can often pay by the use, but when you build, you have to pay for the applications and the infrastructure. In order to build a model, you need very large data sets for the models to run on. So that's you need the data for the models to run even when you rent them. But when you build them, you need even more. When you're renting them, you need the models. You need the data to know how to apply the model. But when you're building them, you need the data to build the model. You need a lot of data to do that. So the cost of a setup is first is kind of build versus rent. If you're just getting started, most of you are probably rent. And that's perfectly fine, and don't because there are hundreds of thousands of these organizations out there now that are creating models that you can rent. We work with a number of them ourselves as companies, and I just see that more and more of them are coming up. And of course, when you rent, you get the benefit of lots of people's data, not just yours, coming in to the answer there. So I'm sorry, I'm gonna get rid of that pop up there. Okay, then of course you need the infrastructure to connect it. You need the infrastructure to run, and then you integrate. So if we're looking at particularly operational AI, where it's involved in a process, now you've got to integrate that into your process model. Where you've got a workflow or robotic process automation. That's part of the cost of setting it up, because the model operationally is only valuable if you can take action on it. And in order to take action on it, it's got to be connected into your operations. So that's the setup cost. And then on the operating side of it, if you build, you're going to need some data scientists. You could rent your data scientists in the form of consultants, but these are the people that know and have the expertise in maintaining the models, continuously refining them. And of course, you would need to maintain the technology infrastructure and then support the ongoing integration of it. So again, this is just, this is not a one-time purchase, not going to run to the store and buy a model, that all the costs are up front. There's an investment cost to set it up, and then there's an operating cost for using it. And then the actual cost will depend, sadly, it depends on what you're doing. So Paul, if we get the next page, please. So I wanted to give you guys a couple of examples of this in real life examples that we've seen organizations succeed with. So let's go to the next. So we're going to do three here. We're going to look at conversational AI. We're going to look at intelligent document processing and process improvement. Now, when I talk about the examples, the example is going to be bigger than the AI because you need to you need more than the AI, because again, this have to be integrated into the business. Now, the conversational and the intelligent document processing are what I would call operational AI, and then the process improvement has characteristics of both operational and strategic AI. So with that, then let's go to the first one here. So conversational AI. So this is where the model is able to take the natural language that we were talking about. And by the way, so this could come from a customer. This could come from a vendor. This could come from an employee. An employee could be, hey, I need to change my health benefits. Hey, I need to sign up for vacation day. A vendor could be, hey, what's the status of my payment? A customer could be, did my order go through, or what's the status of my order, or something like that. Again, all the kind of natural language. We're talking in this case text. I mean, there are different things that we would do for different media, but for this discussion, let's just kind of talk about text. So this could be a chat, this could be a text, this could be an email, but it's all this information coming in humans' language, not in structured data. So when it comes in, you see the first box there is AI authenticates and understands the request. Well, we would build into protections. This isn't AI, but we build into the protections of this flow to make sure that the person making the request is actually should be permitted to make the request, and that they're entitled to whatever answer we're going to give them. So again, we're not talking about authentication now, but I just wanted to call that out there. So now we've got to understand the request. So it could come in. My example earlier is Paula, like, send me lunch, and then the model could reply back, do you want cheeseburger, do you want pizza, do you want whatever it is, and then going back and forth, it would say, well, did you want one of these three things? Then which Paula could say yes or no. So if she said no, then it may say, well, how about this? Is this what you mean? And ultimately, what the robot is doing is the model is doing is learning is firstly understanding the nature that we're looking for food. So the replies would be, these are food, and then at some point it's either going to get it. Oh, I know what I want. And it's going to pass it off. As you can see, that arrow in the middle there, request is fulfilled, and goes back to the person through the media that they asked, or it's going to go over to a person, presumably, who's then going to take over that dialogue with that person, that other person that made the request, and it's going to work it through to what it is. Now, this is where, we talked about machine learning, of course, on the first part, which is, going back and forth. Did you mean this? Did you mean that? Did you mean that? But the machine learning also applies here, because the models can observe how the people working the model solved it. And then that knowledge goes back into the model. So next time it says, did you mean this? Did you mean that? It would look at, oh, well, last time when this happened, I didn't know the person figured out that it was Chinese food. So now I'm going to offer Chinese food as another option here. So this is an example of the models, being able to understand the natural language, the intent of the request in the natural language, and then the machine learning aspect of it for this. So I'll give you an example. So we were working with a big food distributor, and they were getting email questions from their customers, and they were getting a lot of them, getting about 300,000 questions a year, which, as the math turns out, took on average about $8 each to answer. So there's a lot of money on this. We were able to use conversational AI to understand the nature of the question, and most of the questions in that case were pretty routine questions, and then come back. So maybe we needed to go into the ERP platform and come back with an answer, and then we give that back to the person. So now that $8, is not there anymore, because the model and the robot were able to answer that question. We were able to surprisingly get about 85% throughput using this model for the types of questions they were getting. Now, your questions could be different, but again, like, this is real stuff, and for this company, like, this was real money, real value for their business. So, Paul, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so. This one is intelligent document processing, or IDP. You may have heard that term. we've got an invoice example here, but this could just as easily be a purchase order from a customer. This could be an application for a loan. This could be lots of different things. Now, the presumption here is that these, in this case, we'll continue with the invoice examples. That the invoices are coming in, and they are in a file form, electronic format, presumably a scan or or some kind of electronic format. Okay, so now this process here has to now say, oh, I just got an invoice. So now it's going to go through this extraction process, and then and I'll come back to that. And then when it's done with the extraction, it's going to, we can do some more validation, and then we can upload it into Coupa or your payable system or wherever you want to put it when you're done. Now, when we look at an invoice, you say, oh, well, how hard is it to read an invoice? It's like, well, if you think about it, everybody structures their invoices the same way. I mean, not the same way. I wish they structured the same way. They structure them in a unique way. And yeah, if you've got, they all typically have a header, they have line items, and they have totals. But now it's up to you as a company. It's like, do I need the line item detail for some reason, or do I not need the line item detail? So all of these things are part of what you have to address when you're talking about data extraction from invoices. And if you've got 5,000 vendors, you're going to have 5 different templates or more. If they have multiple locations, you can have more than 5,000 different invoice types coming in at you. So now here's we use the AI model to read. It's the OCR form of the model here to read and extract the data attributes off of that invoice. So it would say, the invoice number, or maybe if it's a PO number, if it was there, or who the vendor was and what the total was, freight, tax, et cetera, and so forth. Okay. So now sometimes the models can get it right, but most of the time, particularly when it's new, it's going to look at it and they'll calculate it's called a confidence score, and they'll say, all right, I think I'm 80% sure I got all this right. Now you as a company get to say, well, 80% is not good enough for me. I got to have somebody verify this. So now you're going to be presented with the information for verification, and the human will verify, yep, on this template, this field here, on this invoice from this vendor, this spot here, labeled invoice no period, means invoice number, and that's it. So now the human is updating what the computer model thought the answers were. Now remember, we talked about machine learning, so now the computer will see, Paula corrected that. I thought invoice number was down here in the footer, but it's really up here. So, and then when we're done, we'll say, good. And then it'll go forward. That invoice will then go forward in the process, and that thing gets repeated over and over and over again. Now, what happens though is that for that vendor, for their invoice, when we're training it, now the machine can remember. Not literally remember, but it remembers. It remembers that, oh, this is where these fields are on this. So the next time it's presented with an invoice from that vendor, it says, oh, well, this is where all the fields are. Now I got it now. And then, so the second time around, its confidence score could be much higher because it's already processed it before. It kind of knows where everything is. And now it's going to come forward again. So maybe if it was 80, maybe it's 95% the second time, and we still might want to have Paul look at it another time, and then after that it'll probably be higher and higher and higher until you just kind of let it flow through at that point. And I've talked with a lot of clients and like, oh, OCR doesn't work, but OCR works now. So we talk about it as AI hyper real. This works now. It's included with the machine learning aspects of it. It's something that you guys, if you got a lot of these going on, or should be seriously considering in your business. So we were working with one of our clients. We were able to get to 92% throughput with a solution that handled the invoices, kind of hands-free handling the invoice. And then of course, when you combine that, I know this is not AI, but when you combine that with RPA, we get to do GL coding. We get to check for PO validation. We get to check shipment records. We get to check all kinds of other things for a complete solution, because we use the AI for invoice. We use AI for other data extraction. We bring it all together. Once this information is structured, we can apply rules, and then you can automate a whole process that would otherwise take a great number of people to execute. So again, so this is just another IDP. This is IDP. You may hear it a lot. We work with Abby. We work with Hyperscience. There's a whole bunch of vendors that do this. Can we get the next one, Paula? This one is my favorite personal, because it's very very cool and very new. This category here, so we call it AI powered process improvement. So you guys, nobody, there isn't anybody that hasn't heard of process mining, task mining, very popular terms in the marketplace right now, but a lot of people had trouble getting the value out of them. So because it's a heavy lift. So these tools gather in the information, and now you got to have your, I'm going to exaggerate, army of BAs go in and add structure to this information in order to visualize it using all the different cool, dashboards and animation that some of these tools have. So in addition to the BAs, you also have to pull your best people off the line to come in and help the BAs understand what it is. So it's, as my colleagues from Tennessee would say, this juice requires a lot of squeeze in order to get it out of the fruit. But when we look at these AI powered process improvement, more recent advancements. And so again, just on the what side here. So it starts with data. So you got to have the data. This falls into the category of I'm building my models. Because you're not building them from scratch. You're retraining other models that have already been built to do process analysis. So it's not a total from scratch build, but it's a build. So now this tool uses log files. So what a log file is? So like if you got a modern system like an SAP or an Oracle, they'll generate a file that says what every user has done, in that system, between some periods of time, every click, every entry, every button, all that is a log file. Okay, that's great for the modern systems, but a lot of what people do aren't captured in log files, because you got stuff happening in Excel, you got stuff happening in email, you have stuff happening in browsers, you have stuff happening in older systems that just don't generate a log file. So what we want to do is we want to pull all this data together, minimally the real activity data, which, what are the people, how are people clicking on the screen? And then we supplement it with the log files when those are available. Okay. So now you have this giant data set of what a particular work group has done. So we apply AI models, first thing, which is discover tasks here. So now the model is going to look at and say, okay, what are people doing? And they'll start to aggregate the work into tasks. And then these tasks will be mapped out. And then when we got our tasks together, now we're going to look at it with another set of models, and we're going to say, how do these tasks come together in processes? So now we get to discover and map processes that consume the tasks. Now, of course, like the same kind of task of opening an email might be in multiple processes, and that's okay. But what happens is that these AI tools will do this stuff. It will build out these models, so it's not just this long data stream that somebody's got to go through in order to get the value from. But the coolest part of this, which I get most excited about, is this bottom part here. It says process identification, is that we actually now can use the models to describe what's happening in the task and what's happening in the process. So that instead of a human having to come in and say, what does action 124 F922 is, it's like, oh, it's open the email. And it presents it in a pseudo natural language so that somebody can read it and say, oh, now I understand what's happening here. So again, like this is like this last part here that I've highlighted is like super powerful. Like you'll hear people who do this for a living will say, oh, well, once we gather all the information, we still got to go log it because, it can't do that. It's not magical. It's not magical. Well, now these models, it's not magical, but it kind of makes it look like magic because it's adding this additional level of description to what's happening to make this now, because then we want this to be usable for people right away, for managers right away. So it's like, how can this be put to use? Again, we're very excited about this particular thing. Go hit the next page, Paula, here. And so think about the kind of questions that your leadership, that you as leaders and your cohort leaders around your company might be saying, like, well, how is this work actually being done? Well, now we know. Now we can know, because these tools can generate a document, generate SOP documents, as is documents that actually reflect what's happening and not what everybody thinks it may be happening. Okay. Now you go one step further. It's like, are these, are the remote workers actually working? We can check that too, because we're tracking this data real time. We can understand what's happening. One of my clients would say, I don't know if everyone's sitting at work at their computer doing work or if they're sitting around the TV eating a ham sandwich. And it's like, well, now we will know, or we can know. So it's like, variance analysis. So where can we standardize? The whole thing about process improvement is eliminate variations for consistent results. Well, now we can see the variations, but more than that, we can understand. So maybe Paula takes longer because Paula is the most senior person on the team and she gets all the hard cases. Whereas Zach is the new guy. He gets all the easy ones. So he's blasting through everything very, very quickly. So there's a reason why the times are different. And we can see that now because we can actually see the work that's getting done. And then my favorite is if we take a snapshot of how the work is done on the first of the month, and then we do all kinds of process improvement campaigns during the month. Okay, at the end of the month or the next month, we give it time to bake in here a bit, and we can take another snapshot and we can compare the results. So we can actually see the impact of the change programs that we're putting in. And these tools, this tool is what I'm thinking about here, you can actually put in individual cost metrics of everyone doing the work. So I could see how much it's costing me to perform each one of these tasks. And I can understand how the effectiveness of my change programs before and after. And that's kind of important because I see a lot, and the other veterans on the phone here will know, we put in this big improvement, we're expecting to have this huge impact, and we only get half the impact. And then we say, well, what happened? Like, what happened to the other half of my money? You CFO, like, where's the rest of my money? And say, well, as it turns out, that the people, because they had more time, started doing other work that they weren't able to do before. So this kind of a tool in here will tell you, all right, so we did in fact eliminate this giant pile of work, but then this other pile of work showed up. And now we get to look at that and say, well, is that other pile of work valuable? Or is it just being done because the people have a few extra hours on it? We can look at the cost. We can look at compliance to SOPs. We got the process dashboards, variance. We've had some success using this to identify automation opportunities, the benefits realization I talked about, alerts. Did something happen that we didn't want to have happen? Again, we have a data set that we can, as I said, operational and strategic. So operationally, what are people doing? And do I have a compliance or some kind of a risk that needs to be dealt with immediately? And then strategic, it's okay. So what's the pipeline that I might have in front of me now to make a decision on what I want to automate? Again, very cool class tools. I look at it as like everyone should have these tools. This is not an option. People on the phone, when we get to Q&A who've done work with some of the other packages, can talk about their experiences and agree or disagree with me on how hard it was to get the value out of them, from an actual use and management perspective. So Paul, get the next slide. Okay, so we're starting to wrap here. So again, wanted to give you some examples. So we talked about conversational AI, a contact center, whether it's employee, customer contact center, great one. Incident management. That was the example I gave you of employee having a customer having questions. Okay, that's incident. What happened? How do I respond? What do I want to do? And then of course HR requests. a lot of conversational AI opportunities. That category is just now starting to take off. Intelligent document processing. This one's been around a bit longer. Some of you may have it, but again, we talked about invoice processing. I mentioned purchase order processing. Any kind of thing where we're bringing in an unstructured document and we got to understand it in order to be able to structure it, to give it to some other system to do work, to do something with. I mean, that's what intelligent document processing is all about. And then, of course, process improvement, was I was just talking about. I forgot to mention this, right? So if we're looking at the people and the variances, there may just be mentoring that needs to be done and training opportunities. So we could see, people are doing things in the wrong order, they're not doing it in the most efficient way. It's about kind of getting the best out of your people and then helping them have the most rewarding jobs by doing the most interesting work and not the routine, mundane work that we can otherwise automate, which is the second thing. And of course, benefits realization, back to my CFO friends here, is how much is it going to cost me? Did I get what I was supposed to get? So Paula, we hit the next page. So how do you get started? Okay, so you have to decide that you want to get started. You have to have accountability. You're going to have to assign some budget for this. It's not free. But if you select and prioritize the right use cases, you can create a lot of opportunities for value in your organizations. And this is real now. It's not hype anymore. This is real stuff. People are saving and having a real impact on this. You got to have your talent for AI. You can rent it. You don't have to hire the decision scientists. This kind of goes back to the kind of models that you need to have, whether they're available for rent or whether you have to build it on your own. But no matter what, you're gonna have to have somebody that's looking after this, in your organization. So you're gonna have to sort through that. You've got the AI enablement of the systems, like we were talking about. Operational AI in particular, doesn't have any value if you cannot integrate it into the real-time or near real-time operations of the organization. And and we're not talking about people going off to the side and running some kind of wizard to come back with an answer and do something with it. But really integrate it into a process. And then like pilots, there's a lot of skepticism for this stuff in organizations. It does really work. A lot of this stuff does lend itself to piloting. It doesn't all lend itself to piloting, or not the piloting the entire process, but we can pilot the AI component of the process to show that it can in fact produce a real thing. So we can take questions if they're. I'm just looking through the chat.
That's awesome. So thank you so much for that, Steve. And now I was just getting nervous. I didn't want to interrupt the presentation but we did have a few questions that popped up. So once this polling question is done, let's see if I can get to those. Yeah, let me pull this over here now. I didn't want to distract. And let me open this up. Fantastic. All right, so there's a couple from Mark. So who is an ideal client for WonderBotz? The kind of company size, the complexity, type of business, types of systems and data that you have to then feed these models. Great question.
Great question. And that's not a plant from us too. That was a legitimate question. So thanks, Mark, for that. So we are, I know we're talking about AI here, but we are a intelligent automation, hyperautomation firm. So that means that we do AI, we do document, IDP, we do RPA, we work with a whole bunch of different platforms to do the conversational AI. So for us, and some of our clients are gigantic, like we have huge Fortune 500 clients that we work with, but we also work with a lot smaller organizations. And really the question is there enough value that we can help you create in your organization to justify the kinds of solutions that we would bring to it. Now, sometimes we work with, I don't know what kind of company you're at, Mark, but like a smaller fintech that is, doing one particular process a lot for clients, like expense review or something, right? Those kind of clients that are growing and scaling, that are otherwise high touch, if you've got a lot of people doing a similar process, your concept might be, well, I'll push it offshore. Okay, well, you could do that. But what we could also do is we could push it to the digital shore with a digital worker. And if you're thinking that you need to have people because we need the judgment that only people can bring, well, then we need to look at that for AI, because some of these AI models will, in fact, as we say, mimic the same results that a person would do. And now you get the benefit of digital workers are the cheapest workers. You have the lowest cost workers. We don't have any of this geopolitical risk from a digital shore. But as we go into different countries, then we have to deal with that. So Mark, if you want to, be delighted to talk to you after the call about the specifics of your situation. Again, we need data. If you've got a bunch of stuff that that are field workers that are doing notes on notepads, and that's not really a good fit for this. So we need these things to be happening in a systemic way.
And the other thing I'd say is that we pride ourselves on our partnerships too. So we've made it a point to partner and align with different AI partners that have some of those subsets of data too. Very unique use cases, and then some that are quite generalized too. So happy to clarify there. All right, and then I'm getting questions on text too. All right. So question, what would be the first area to tackle in getting started, Steve? How would you advise one of the first areas to tackle? Yeah, everybody knows my answer to that, so you go ahead.
I think we do a lot of work in finance and accounting, so hence our discussion with you guys today. But if you wanted to get started, like an easy way to get started is with the process improvement. Because we can deploy that quickly, and then that will build a fact set for you that you can make intelligent decisions on for where to apply process improvement and where to apply automation. So I think that is a great way to start. Now, a lot of times, though, companies, we'd have a conversation with you. What I find is the leaders kind of know where the high priority opportunities are. We don't need a complex AI engine to tell us that invoicing is broken, right? We can just talk to the people that run invoicing and know that there's a huge opportunity there. But again, if you're looking for a low cost start, the process improvements one. Also, a nice part about process improvement is not only can you deploy it within an area, I forgot to mention this, is that you can deploy to the adjacent areas. So now not only do we see how work gets done in one place, but we see how we see how the payable team is interacting with treasury, for example, or we're seeing how the procurement team is interacting with the product managers, if you have those. So again, it really depends on where you are.
All right, fantastic. So Angela, Debbie, thanks so much for letting us put on a special program. I know this is unconventional. To the finance leaders that joined us, thank you so much.